Hello, this is the first video I've made in a very, very long time, and the first one I've ever made with an actual decent camera and a decent microphone. So, I'm going to be wearing the headphones probably for the first few videos till I have a better sense of how my voice sounds at different places in my room, and I'll optimize the placement of the microphone for that. Once my room is clean and I do my laundry properly, as you can see. And then, yeah, because wood floors, wood walls, and everything, so there's a lot of overtones that are created, which is nice. I like to sing with overtones a lot, and I'm looking forward to doing that. But today I wanted to just read a short story by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. It's from a collection of essays and short stories of his. The book is called Armageddon in Retrospect. Sorry, I'm gonna have to get out of the habit of clearing my throat all the time because this new microphone is gonna make that awful. So I'll try not to do it very often. But I smoke a lot, so there's always gunk in there because I like to sing blues and it helps with that. Anyways, and the short story is named The Commandant's Desk, and it's set in kind of a alternate history where America and Russia went to war, like the Cold War escalated, and the Americans beat the Russians, and they've just liberated Czechoslovakia, and so that's the setting. It's explained, but anyways. The Commandant's Desk by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. I was sitting before the window of my small cabinet-making shop in the Czechoslovakian town of Beda. My widowed daughter, Marta, held the curtain back for me and watched the Americans through one corner of the window, being careful not to block any of my view with her head. "I wish he would turn this way so we could see his face," I said impatiently. "Marta, pull the curtain back more." "Is he a general?" said Marta. "A general is commandant for Beta," I laughed. "A corporal, maybe. But how well fed they all look, huh? Ah, how they eat. How they eat." I ran my hand along the back of my black cat. "Now, Kitty, you have only to cross the street for your first taste of American cream." I raised my hands over my head. "Marta, do you feel it? Do you feel it too? The Russians are gone, Marta. They're gone." And now we were trying to see the face of the American commandant, who was moving into the building across the street, where the Russian commandant had been a few weeks before. The Americans went inside, kicking their way through rubbish and splintered furniture. For a while, there was nothing to see through my window. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. "It's over. The killing is all over," I said, "and we're alive. Did you think that was possible? Did anyone in his right mind expect to be alive when it was over?" "I feel almost as though being alive were something to be ashamed of," she said. The world will probably feel that way for a long, long time. You can at least thank God you've come through it all with very little guilt in all of the killing. Having been helpless in the middle has that advantage. Think of the guilt on the shoulders of the Americans. 100,000 dead in Moscow bombings, 50,000 in Kiev. What about the guilt of the Russians?" she said passionately. "No, not the Russians. That's one of the joys of losing war. You surrender your guilt along with your capital and join the ranks of innocent little people." The cat rubbed her flanks against my wooden leg and purred. I suppose most men with wooden legs conceal the fact as best they can. I lost my left leg as an Austrian infantryman in 1916, and I wear one trouser leg higher than the other to show off the handsome oak peg I made for myself after World War I. Carved in the peg are the images of Georges Clemenceau, David Lloyd George, and Woodrow Wilson, who helped the Czech Republic rise from the ruins of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1919, when I was 25. And below these images are two more, each with an arif, Thomas Masaryk and Edward Bernays, the first leaders of the Republic. There are other faces that should be added, and now that the piece is with us once again, perhaps I will carve them. The only carving I've done on the peg in the past 30 years is crude and obscure, and maybe barbaric. 3 deep nicks near the iron tip for the 3 German officers whose car I sent down a mountainside one night in 1943 during the Nazi occupation. These men across the street weren't the first Americans I'd seen. I owned a furniture factory in Prague during the days of the Republic, and I did a great deal of business with buyers for American department stores. When the Nazis came, I lost my factory and moved to Beta, this quiet town in the foothills of Sudetenland. My wife died soon after of the rarest of causes, the natural ones. Then I had my only daughter, Marta. Now, praise God, I was seeing Americans again. After the Nazis, after the Russian army of World War II, after the Czech communists, after the Russians again. Knowing this day was coming had kept me alive. Hidden under the floorboards of my workshop was a bottle of scotch that had constantly tried my willpower, but I left it in its hiding place. It was to be my present to the Americans when they finally came. "They're coming out," said Marta. I opened my eyes to see a stocky, red-headed American major staring at me from across the street, his hands on his hips. He looked tired and annoyed. Another young man, a captain, tall, massive, and slow, and very Italian-looking, except for his stature, strode out of the building to join him. Stupidly, perhaps, I blinked back at them. "They're coming over here," I said excitedly, helplessly. The major and the captain walked in, each looking down at a blue pamphlet, which I gathered contained Czech phrases. The big captain seemed self-conscious, and I sensed that the red-headed major was a little belligerent. The captain ran his fingers down the margin of a page and shook his head dispiritedly. "Machine gun, mortar, motorcycle, tank, tourniquet, trench. Nothing about filing cabinets, desks, or chairs." "What the hell do you expect?" said the major. "It's a book for soldiers, not a bunch of pansy clerks." He scowled at the pamphlet, said something completely unintelligible, and looked up at me expectantly. "There's one hell of a swell book," he said. "Says it the only way to ask for an interpreter, and the old man acts like it was Ubangi poetry." "Gentlemen, I speak English," I said, "and my daughter Marta, too." "By God, he really does," said the major. "Good for you, Pop." He made me feel like a small dog who had, cleverly, for a small dog, fetched him a rubber ball. I held out my hand to the major and told him my name. He looked down at my hand superciliously and kept his hands in his pockets. I felt myself reddening. "My name is Captain Paul Donnelly," said the other man quickly, "and this is Major Lawson Evans." He shook my hand. "Sir," he said to me. His voice was paternal and deep. "The Russians." The major used an epithet that made my jaw drop and amazed Marta, who had heard soldiers talk for the better part of her life. Captain Donnelly was embarrassed. "They haven't left a single stick of furniture," he continued, "and I'm wondering if you could let us have some of the pieces in your shop here." "I was going to offer you them," I said. "It's a tragedy they smashed everything." They confiscated the most beautiful furniture in Beta. I smiled and shook my head. Ah, those enemies of capitalism. They had their quarters fixed up like a little Versailles. We saw the wreckage, said the captain. And then, when they couldn't have the treasures any more, then no one else could have them. I made a motion, like a man swinging an axe, and the world becomes a little duller for us all, for there being fewer treasures in it. Bourgeois treasures maybe, but those who can't afford beautiful things love the idea of there being such things somewhere. The captain nodded pleasantly, but, to my surprise, I saw that the words had somehow irritated Major Evans. Well, anyway, I said, I want you to take whatever you need. It will be an honor to help you. I was wondering if now was the opportune time to offer them the scotch. Things weren't going quite as I expected, however. He's real smart, Pop is, said the Major acidly. I suddenly realized what it was the Major had been implying. It was a shock. He was telling me that I was one of the enemy. He meant that I should cooperate because I was afraid. He wanted me to be afraid. For an instant, I was physically sick. Once, as a much younger and more Christian man, I like to say that men who depended on fear to get things done were sick and pathetic and pitifully alone. Later, after having seen whole armies of such men in action, I saw that I was the kind that was alone, and maybe sick and pathetic too, but I would have killed myself rather than admit it. I had to be wrong about the new commandant. I told myself I'd been suspicious, and now that I'm old I can say it, afraid for too long. But Marta felt the threat, the fear in the air too, I could tell. She was hiding her warmth, as she had hidden it for years, behind a dull, prim mask. Yes, I said, you are welcome to anything you can use. The Major pushed open the door of the back room, where I sleep and I do my work. I was through being host. I sank back down in my chair by the window. Captain Donnelly, ill at ease, stayed with Marta and me. It's very beautiful here in the mountains, he said lamely. We lapsed into an uncomfortable silence, broken from time to time by the Major's rummaging about in the back room. I took a good look at the captain and was struck by how much more boyish he seemed than the Major, though it was quite possible that they were the same age. It was hard to imagine him on a battlefield, and it was hard to imagine the Major anywhere else. I heard Major Evans give a low whistle, and I knew he'd found the commandant's desk. The Major must have been a very brave man. He has so many medals, said Marta at last. Captain Donnelly seemed grateful for a chance to explain about his superior. He was and is an extremely brave man, he said warmly. He said that the Major and most of the enlisted men in Beta had come from an apparently famous armored division, which, the captain implied, never knew fear or fatigue, and loved nothing better than a good fight. I clucked my tongue in wonderment, as I always do when hearing of such divisions in the army. I have heard of them from American officers, German officers, Russian officers, and my officers in World War I solemnly declared that I belonged to such a division. When I hear of a division of war lovers from an enlisted man, maybe I will believe it, provided that man is sober and has been shot at. If there are such divisions, perhaps they should be preserved between wars in dry ice. And what about you? Said Marta, breaking into the captain's blood and thunder biography of Major Evans. He smiled. I'm so new to Europe, I can't, if you'll pardon the expression, find my behind with both hands. The air of Fort Benning, Georgia is still in my lungs. The Major, he's the hero, been fighting for 3 years without a break. and I didn't figure to wind up here as a combination constable, county clerk, and wailing wall, said Major Evans, standing in the doorway of the back room. Pop, I want this desk. Making it for yourself, were you? What would I do with a desk like that? I was building it for the Russian commandant. A friend of yours, huh? I tried to smile, unconvincingly, I imagine. I wouldn't be here to talk to you if I had refused to make it. And I wouldn't be here to talk to him if I hadn't made a bed for the Nazi commandant, with a garland of swastikas and the first stanza of the Horst Wessel song on the headboard. The captain smiled with me, but the major didn't. This one is different, said the major. He comes right out and says he was a collaborator. I didn't say that, I said evenly. Don't spoil it, said Major Evans. It's a refreshing change. Marta suddenly hurried upstairs. I was no collaborator, I said. Sure. Fought them every inch of the way. You bet, I know. Come here a minute, will you? I want to talk about my desk. He was seated on the unfinished desk, an enormous and, to me, hideous piece of furniture. I designed it as a private satire on the Russian commandant's bad taste and hypocrisy about symbols of wealth. I'd made it as ornate and pretentious as possible. A Russian peasant's dream of what a Wall Street banker's desk looked like. It glittered with bits of colored glass, set like jewels in the wood, and it was highlighted with radiator paint that looked something like gilt. Now it appeared that the satire would have to remain private, for the American commandant was as taken by it as the Russian had been. This is what I call a piece of furniture, said Major Evans. Very nice, said Captain Donaghy absently. He was looking up the stairs where Marta had fled. There's just one thing wrong with it, Pop. The hammer and sickle, I know. I was going to take... How right you are, said the Major. He drew back his book and gave the massive oak desk a savage kick on its edge. The round piece broke free, rolled drunkenly into a corner, and settled face down with a... The cat investigated it and backed away suspiciously. An eagle goes there, Pop. The Major took off his cap to show me the American eagle on it, like this one. Not a simple design. It'll take a while, I said. Not as simple as a swastika or a hammer and sickle, huh? I dreamed for weeks of sharing the joke at the desk with the Americans, of telling them about the secret drawer I'd built in it for the Russian commandant, the richest joke of them all. Now the Americans were here, and I felt little different than before, rotten and lost and lonely. I didn't feel like sharing anything with anyone but Marta. No, I said, answering the Major's poisonous question. No, sir. What was I supposed to say? The scotch stayed under the floorboards, and the secret drawer in the desk remained a secret. Alright, I'll pick up in another video, for the next part. My voice is kind of... I need to clear it, and I don't want to be, into the microphone, so, I hope that was good. Let me know, and, yeah, I hope you're all doing very well. I don't know what to say in these things. Anyways, cheers.